It's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio, welcoming you to another edition of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, successful, and intelligent people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org, for more info, or you can email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Frank P. Daversa. We'll be discussing his fantastic book, Spirituality in the 21st Century. Available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or if you guys want to get everything that Frank has to offer, do yourself a favor and go directly to his personal site, frankdaversa.biz. There, not only will you be able to find more information on Frank himself, but you'll also find more information on spirituality in the 21st century, as well as find hyperlinks set up to take you to the purchasing page. So one more time, that's frankdaversa.biz. And I will say, Frank was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by some of the best movers in the business, author Reputation Press Publishing. So if you have a book that you'd like moved, do yourself a favor and move it through ARP. You can find out more information on them at authorreputationpress.com. And guys, listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Frank here on the line, because his book that we're discussing today, and right there in the title, you understand what we're getting ready to embark upon. In his book, Frank is really going to go through and express the importance of really maintaining your spirituality, or establishing your spirituality, and the importance of having it in today's time, right? And it's spirituality in the 21st century, so it's going to be written and discussed in a very contemporary vernacular. And listen, I'm very excited to have him here because he's the expert, okay? He's done the research. He's going to be able to articulate all the nuances in his book much better than I ever could. So without further ado, let's bring him here on the line with us. Frank, first and foremost, thank you so much for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction. How are you?
My pleasure, Benji. How are you?
I am fantastic, man. Thank you very much for asking. And Frank, we're really looking forward to this. I know that we have a ton of information to cover, but we're very much looking forward to hearing, A, your particular experience writing the book, but also B, the education that we're going to receive is something that we're very, very much looking forward to benefiting from. So let's jump right in. Now, Frank, let's start. Give us some background information on yourself.
I was raised in the town of South Hempstead, New York. It was during my college years that I honed my writing skills. I earned my associate's degree in 1981 with honors. 2 years after earning my bachelor's degree in 1986, I moved to Houston, Texas. I worked 14 years in the corporate world before becoming a writer in 2007. I published my first web article on spirituality in 2008, and my first book, Young Adolf, An Alternate History, in 2011. I published my second book, Politics in America, A Guide to the Two-Party System, in 2012. I've been on a spiritual journey since contracting a serious illness in 1997, which inspired me to write my latest book, Spirituality in the 21st Century.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for articulating that, Frank. And listen, first and foremost, what an impressive background, right? The accolades in which you've been able to achieve over the years is absolutely impressive. Now, Frank, as you articulated, you started to talk about the inspiration for this book came when you were infected by an illness. Describe to our listening audience your illness, please.
I have a psychiatric condition known as schizoaffective disorder, in which my thoughts sometimes become distorted and my emotions become withdrawn. When that happens, I lose my ability to socialize, and the only thing I can do is isolate myself from others until it subsides. It is impossible for me to think clearly during such times. I take medication to keep it under control. I had signs something strange was happening in the days leading up to my 40th birthday, which is when I lost all control. I entered into a manic state and felt compelled to throw away a lot of my extraneous belongings. Eventually, the manic state gave way to a series of prolonged depressions in which my thoughts became distorted. I was hospitalized on numerous occasions during this time. I haven't had a full episode since 2009. although I have had several smaller ones, which then would go away after a few hours or so. You see, I was an agnostic for 20 years leading up to the outbreak, and I firmly believe this illness was God's way of putting me back into spiritual alignment. It was during a low point in my illness that I renewed my faith in God. As a result, I began to view spirituality and life in a more enlightened way, which in turn inspired me to write a book on the subject.
Absolutely. Now, how did you get started writing?
I've always had a desire to express my thoughts effectively. I took a writing course in college which strengthened my skills. With the advent of email in the early 90s, that desire crystallized even further. When I lost my corporate job, I came up with the idea of a book on spirituality. I worked diligently on that idea starting in 2007. That effort led me to an article on spirituality, which in turn led to my book. Over time, I gradually added more material to it. From start to finish, it has taken me 14 years to fully develop. During that time, I published 2 of the books which I mentioned.
Frank, I'm curious. We know that there are a number of books out there written about spirituality. I mean, it's a very common topic. I'm curious, what makes this book different from others in its category?
The book cuts through religious dogma and presents the material in a straightforward, down-to-earth manner. It should be easy and enjoyable for any adult to read. In it, I talk about my life experiences in the world in general. I've been through a lot of adversity in my time, and I try to share the lessons I've learned along the way with my readers.
Mm-hmm. And now, there are, I'm sure, so many themes and messages and concepts that can be found within the confines of the book. Articulate to our listening audience, Frank, what themes and or concepts would you like to highlight during this interview?
First, I contend there are 5 fundamental principles necessary for achieving spiritual enlightenment. Follow them closely along with the rest of the book, and you should realize it in your lifetime. Secondly, there are 5 C's that make a relationship work. Adhere to them closely and you'll see it grow. Third, there are 3 important lessons the Earth needs to learn in the 21st century. The planet needs to support measures that actively address these lessons more fully.
Now, is there anything controversial about your book?
Actually, there's more than one. For example, I do not believe in the devil. I don't believe God would allow a being who thrives on stealing souls on a grand scale and leads people into temptation for all eternity to coexist in his kingdom. Instead, I view the devil metaphorically as a potential for bad deeds in each of us. I do, however, wholeheartedly believe in a place called hell. Once we reach adulthood, each of us is the sole arbiter of whether we end up there or in heaven.
Frank, share some of your thoughts about relationships from the book.
Many factors go into making a good relationship. Love, trust, dedication, sincerity, and romance, as well as what I call the 5 C's. 1, compatibility, a strong personal interaction. 2, communication, the ability to discuss the positive and negative aspects of the relationship in a constructive manner. 3, compassion, an emotional bond towards the other person. 4, commitment, a dedication to the success of the relationship. And 5, compromise, the ability to negotiate differences fairly and amicably. Romantically speaking, it's natural that no 2 people are the same, so at some point there are going to be differences. This is where good communication plays an important role. If you can't successfully resolve disputes, the relationship has a limited future, no matter how beneficial the good attributes of either partner are. Communication contributes towards building understanding and trust between the 2 parties, which combined with the other 4 C's, helps build a distinct and healthy affection that can last a lifetime. If the bond of love between the 2 partners is strong, the relationship can lead to marriage. But if your prospective partner isn't able to follow the 5 C's, then he or she may not be ready for a serious relationship. One thing you don't want to do is rush into marriage.
Again, here on the line with Frank P. Daversa. We're discussing his fantastic book, Spirituality in the 21st Century, available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or directly through his personal site, frankdaversa.biz. Now, Frank, this is all fantastic, and everything that you've relayed thus far is so informative. Please, if you can, we'd love to hear one of your excerpts.
My pleasure. It is taken from chapter 13. It is a bridge for succinctness. Of all the problems that exist in the world today, there is one so pervasive that it touches upon everyone in one way or another. It has been around since the dawn of humanity. Wars have been fought because of it. It is handed down from generation to generation. It manifests itself on both an individual and societal level. This problem is intolerance. Intolerance is the unyielding adherence to one's opinions or prejudices, regardless of how damaging they may be. Tolerance, on the other hand, is the act of acceptance, the measure of a person's ability to effectively deal with difficulty. The question is, do we want to live life full of happiness or hostility? Our society is filled with intolerance against minorities, LGBT individuals, illegal immigrants, and others. For example, blacks have been disenfranchised and underprivileged throughout history, including the present. They are often unfairly targeted by law enforcement. Are we going to merely accept such practices or challenge them and become better citizens as a result? There is no room for complacency in this regard. We cannot rest on our laurels and take for granted accomplishments made by previous generations. We conquered many forms of prejudice following the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement, but our work is not done. Ultimately, we need to ask ourselves, does there need to be more or less tolerance in God's universe? The only rational, humane answer to that question is more.
There you go. Powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. Thank you so much for sharing, Frank. You know, as we start to tie up this fantastic interview, what is one thing that you really want your readers to learn or take away from this book?
The book is designed to be inspirational. No matter what your circumstance, I want readers to know there is always a better way to proceed in life so long as you put in the necessary effort into finding it. I tried to provide a vision of hope towards spirituality and life in general.
You know, Frank, really a curiosity for myself. Articulate to our listening audience, what would you say was really one of the most challenging parts of writing this book?
Chapter 6, Achieving Enlightenment, was the most challenging one to write. It is detailed, and I wanted to get it just right. Chapter 8, Wants versus Needs, was the easiest. I've been practicing those principles my whole life.
Frank, last question. Being an artist myself, I love having this platform to really be able to pay it forward, in a sense, to other artists that are out there. Now, you're someone who, you're a published author, right? As you stated, this is not the only book in which you've written. This is the third book that you've written, and hopefully more on the horizon to come in the future. So you're someone that has been through the process of writing a book. You've been through the process of editing the book and putting it to a publishing company and getting it put out. Talk to our listening audience, Frank. Any words of wisdom that you can relay to a new writer, someone just starting out?
Well, to start with, you want to get your ideas on paper. And once you do, then you can worry about going back and editing syntax and grammar.
Absolutely. You know, listen, great words of wisdom, Frank. Just get your words on the page. Guys, second guessing yourself is natural, right? I mean, that's a human characteristic. But at the end of the day, you don't want to edit before the words are there, right? Worry about the editing later. If you have an idea, if you have a passion to write, just put the words on the page. You can go back, judge the writing, critique the writing, edit the writing later on. Just get the words on the page first and foremost. Frank, wonderful, wonderful words of wisdom. Guys, you know what you got to do. What more can be said? This is such a fantastic book and really something that is so beneficial for our contemporary audience. Head on over to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or directly through his personal site, frankdaversa.biz, and pick up your copy of Spirituality in the 21st Century by Frank P. Daversa. You surely will not be disappointed. Guys, let's grow, let's develop, let's educate ourselves. And through that, we'll be able to break down the barriers. Frank, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you once again for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction.
My pleasure, Benji.